Kevin Costner is a lasting symbol of American movies. He was the brave protector in The Bodyguard, the dreamer in Field of Dreams, and the bold filmmaker who brought Dances with Wolves to life, changing forever how Hollywood tells stories. He came from the dusty town of Linwood, California. His dad dug ditches and his mom was a social worker. He didn't rise up because he was rich or lucky. He made it through hard work, strong faith, and a deep belief in the power of human stories. He's not just an actor. He's someone who builds emotion. A man who found truth in silence, turned loneliness into poetry, and created worlds where hope and sadness walked together. But behind that calm voice and proud look, there's a heart that's been hurt and beaten by storms. 2 failed marriages, 7 kids with 3 different women, and the mess of love broken by cheating, eaten up by courtroom fights, and buried under losses that even fame couldn't fix. The clapping could never cover up the silence that came after. The spotlight could never warm up the coldness of an empty home. And now, at 70, the storm comes back darker, heavier, and closer than ever. Kevin Michael Costner was born on January 18th, 1955 in Linwood, California. He was the youngest son of William Bill Costner, a ditch digger who became a power line worker, and Sharon Ray, a social worker with kind eyes and tired hands. Their life was built on the edge of getting by. Their home was small, and their dreams were simple. But love, unspoken and steady, kept them warm when winters pushed through the thin walls of rented houses. 2 years before Kevin was born, in 1953, tragedy had already touched their lives. His middle brother, Mark Douglas Costner, lived for only a single day before his tiny heart stopped beating. It was the kind of quiet loss that changes a family without ever being talked about out loud. From that day on, love in the Costner home became something fierce, protective, and sometimes hard. Bill and Sharon carried their sadness like a shadow they couldn't put down. By the time Kevin turned 12, he had already packed his life into more boxes than most people do in a lifetime. The Costners were always moving. Compton, Ventura, Visalia, Orange County. Chasing work, chasing stability, never catching either for long. Each move was another small heartbreak. New schools, new faces, new beginnings that always ended too soon. We were always packing, always starting over, he would later remember. I learned to keep my world inside. He wasn't the loud one or the star athlete. He was the quiet kid at the back of the class who wrote poems instead of answers. One night, as another moving truck pulled away, Kevin sat in the back seat, watching the street lights flicker past like memories he wasn't allowed to keep. He didn't cry. He just whispered goodbye to another town that never knew him. But through that quiet ache, something unshakable took root. A belief that even if the world didn't see him, he could still build something that would last. In 1978, fresh out of California State University, Fullerton, with a degree in marketing and finance, he did what every good son was supposed to do. He found a steady job. Each morning, he buttoned his shirt, smiled for the world, and died a little inside. The paycheck was steady, the life predictable. But the silence inside him was deafening. His heart wasn't in numbers. It was in stories, in the invisible worlds that no one else could see. Then fate stepped in, wearing the face of Richard Burton. It was an ordinary flight home from his honeymoon in Mexico. Ordinary until Kevin looked to his right and saw one of the greatest actors alive sitting beside him. Nervously, he told Burton a secret that had been burning inside him for years. He wanted to act, but he was afraid to try. Burton studied him and said simply, "You have green eyes." "I have green eyes. I think you'll be fine." When the plane landed, Burton's limousine pulled up to the runway, while Kevin and his new wife waited for a bus. Burton leaned out the window and whispered 2 words that would echo for the rest of Kevin's life. "Good luck." Within weeks, he quit his job. The world didn't applaud. It turned its back. He packed 1 suitcase, a second-hand jacket, and drove a beat-up Datsun toward Los Angeles with barely enough money for gas. What followed wasn't the romantic struggle people like to imagine. It was hunger, cold, and quiet desperation. He scrubbed boats, drove delivery trucks, gave bus tours of movie stars' homes while wondering if he'd ever have one of his own. Some nights the heat in his apartment failed, and he curled up fully clothed, whispering to himself, "Just one more day. Just keep going." Days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and rejection. He carried a folder of headshots that grew limp from the sweat of his hands, knocking on casting doors that never opened. "Leave your photo," they'd say without looking up. Los Angeles had promised dreams. Instead, it gave him silence. Yet, even in that silence, something hardened, a quiet determination that he would not go home defeated. For 6 long years, he auditioned and disappeared. Casting agents barely glanced up, faces blurred, doors closed, and the dream that had burned so bright began to flicker. He landed a role in The Big Chill, only to have every scene cut from the final film. He watched the premiere alone, his name erased, his faith hanging by a thread. He wasn't just broke. He was invisible, yet he refused to surrender. "Dreams don't open doors," he would later say. "They just give you the strength to keep knocking." And in 1985, when Lawrence Kasdan, the very director who had once cut him, called him for a new role in Silverado, Kevin Costner finally stepped into the light. When the camera rolled, the forgotten man from the edge of Hollywood burned across the screen like someone who had waited his whole life for that single moment. The applause that followed wasn't for luck. It was for survival. When Silverado hit theaters in 1985, Kevin Costner's name no longer drifted past unnoticed. It stayed. 2 years later, in The Untouchables, he became the symbol of American virtue. Quiet courage, moral conviction, a man who stood tall in chaos. The movie made over $100 million. With Bull Durham in 1988 and Field of Dreams a year later, he carved his name into the very soul of American cinema. When he stood in that cornfield whispering, "If you build it, he will come," audiences felt as if he was speaking directly to them. By 1990, at 35, Kevin was no longer content to just act. He wanted to create. He borrowed against his own money, formed TIG Productions, and set out to make Dances with Wolves. Hollywood called it madness. A 3-hour Western in Lakota. Career suicide, they said. Studios begged him to cut the long silences, but he refused. When the movie finally premiered, it didn't just succeed, it soared. Dances with Wolves earned $424 million, won 7 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director, and made the boy from Linwood one of Hollywood's most powerful men. Then came The Bodyguard, 1992. He waited a year for Whitney Houston to take the role and rejected a $10 million salary in exchange for profit share. The film made $411 million. Its soundtrack sold over 50 million copies. Then came the fall. Waterworld 1995 should have been his next triumph. Instead, it nearly drowned him. The press mocked him mercilessly. His follow-up, The Postman, bombed even harder. Yet even then, he didn't retreat into comfort. He went back to work. When Yellowstone arrived in 2018, the quiet became thunder. At 63, Costner played John Dutton. Yellowstone became cable's most-watched drama. By season 5, he earned $1.3 million per episode. When Kevin met Cindy Silva in 1975 at California State University Fullerton, he was 20, uncertain, and dreaming far beyond his reach. They married in 1978 with nothing but a borrowed ring. When Annie was born in 1984, Lily in 1986, and Joe in 1988, he promised to build a world worthy of them. But success eats up the very things it feeds on. Fame arrived like a flood. She waited through missed birthdays while raising 3 children. In 1994, after 16 years together, they filed for divorce. They settled at roughly $80 million US. There had been no prenup, only trust. Then in 1996, Kevin met Bridget Rooney. From that quiet chapter came something permanent. A son, Liam Timothy Costner, born in 1996. Kevin accepted responsibility immediately. When Kevin met Christine Baumgartner, it was with the quiet hope of a man who had already lost and learned. They married on September 25, 2004, at his beloved Dunbar Ranch in Aspen. 3 children followed, Caden Wyatt, Hayes Logan, and Grace Avery. For nearly 2 decades, they built what looked like heaven on earth. But by the early 2020s, word crept back. In May 2023, she filed for divorce. By early 2024, it was legally over. Today at 70, Kevin stands as living proof that no dream ever truly fades. His net worth exceeds $250 million. He is the father of 7 children. His life teaches us that hardship is not the opposite of grace, but its gateway.